Welcome to Trauma Talk. I'm Cheryl, a teacher, hypnobirthing teacher, doula and birth keeper. And if you don't know me already, I love talking about trauma, but in particular birth trauma, even though it's all linked together. And that's what this podcast is for, to talk about trauma, to talk about birth trauma and explore how that all links together. I'm not from a clinical background and I don't have a medical degree, but I'm talking from the point of view of human experience, my own human experience and the things that I've learned and the experiences of those who I've been lucky enough to support in their journeys to, more often than not, a healing birth, which is what they were setting out to do. So thank you so much for being here. If you have any suggestions for what we should be talking about, or any suggestions for guests, or you want to put yourself forward, then please get in touch at cheryl@simplynatal.co.uk or find me on Instagram or Facebook as Simply Natal, the Healing Birth Doula. Enjoy. Hello, welcome to episode 3. I hope you're enjoying the podcast so far. Please do get in touch to let me know if you've got any comments or questions or anything that comes up for you. I realised that the first 2 episodes have been very trauma heavy. So episode 3 is going to be about the healing birth hierarchy of needs. I realised that I might have people who are pregnant listening or planning a pregnancy listening, and perhaps birth workers hoping to help people to have those pregnancies after trauma as well. So this one can hopefully be a really positive addition to your birth preparation or your support of other people. You might have heard me talking about the healing birth hierarchy of needs before. I have mentioned it a few times, and I talk about it in my trauma-informed birthwork course that I teach to birth workers. So, what is it? I hear you ask. So, have you heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs? If you haven't heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, I'll give you a little bit of a rundown and you can go find out more if you want to. Abraham Maslow was an American psychologist, and he created the hierarchy of needs, or it's known as Maslow's hierarchy or Maslow's pyramid. And it was in around the 1950s. It might have been like 1943, don't quote me. So it's been around a while. And it's a model known to many people working in psychology. It should be known to people working in psychology, but it's also known beyond that as well. And I first learned about it actually when I was doing my PGCE and training to be a secondary school teacher. And that made a lot of sense when you know what it is, because you can't expect a student to give their best and achieve their best if they are not having their most basic needs met, i.e., child comes to school without having had their breakfast, or perhaps, they haven't had enough sleep, and we're expecting them to work to the best of their ability today. No, that's not going to happen, is it? So it's recognising that we do have needs that need to be met in order for us to achieve the highest level of our existence and our potential. And what I find interesting, especially as an RE teacher, is that what Maslow was trying to do was to bring together the 2 ideas that were very prevalent in the US at the time that he was alive. One of which was focused almost entirely on spiritual needs and kind of given up all of our worldly goods in order to be more connected to God and our spirit, our soul, perhaps. And another kind of way of thinking, which was gaining popularity, was the idea that we only need to meet these basic needs of food and shelter and that kind of thing, and a more materialistic view of life being about us having the things that we need and there being nothing else beyond that we need. So a more kind of agnostic or atheist view. And Maslow aimed in his hierarchy to bring the two of those planes together. And he created his pyramid, which has, let me count them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5 sections. So if you imagine a triangle, and I'll perhaps link to a picture or something in the show notes as well, so that you can see what it looks like. Although if you do a quick Google, you'll find it anyway. 5 levels of this pyramid or triangle, and if we imagine it like a building, then the foundations of that triangle are at the very bottom, and each level needs the one below it to be placed upon it. So the ones above can't really exist without the ones below holding it up. So at the very bottom, as you might expect, we've got the physiological needs. And the physiological needs are things like food and water and shelter and, you know, those basic needs that we have to survive and the needs that our body has. And we then build upon that with safety needs, you know, because we can have all of the things, but we need to be safe on top of that. And that safety could be having financial security in the world that we live in, so that we might have shelter, but we also have the security of knowing that shelter is going to be there next month and the month after as well. That safety might include things to do with our body, but it might also include things to do with our mind and our emotions and our psychological safety. The next one above that is about connection and about love and belonging. So us needing in order to have those relationships, those good connected relationships and feel like we belong, we need to have the safety and the physiological needs met first. But in order for us to get any higher up the pyramid, we need to have that secure love and attachment that we might get from family or relationships with others, and I suppose relationship to ourselves as well. Moving up to the next level then, we have the esteem needs. And those esteem needs are a lot to do with how we feel about ourselves and whether we are acknowledged for the work that we do as well, you know, having that nod, that you know, acknowledgement that we have done a good job, and having the belief within us that we've also done a good job as well. And at the very peak of the pyramid is the self-actualization. So of course we could live perfectly happy lives, perhaps, or maybe we can't, I don't know, if we were you know, above the safety needs somewhere. You know, we've got that love and belonging, and you know, we can be okay, we can be perfectly happy there. But we often find that as human beings, we actually have a drive for more, and we want to achieve more, and we don't always know what that is. We might spend our life aiming to figure that out. But the self-actualization at the very top is about us really becoming our best selves and achieving our potential and doing the thing that we really want to do. I really love Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It really sets out for us how important some things are that we might not always give attention to, and how we need an awful lot of things to be in place for us to achieve our most peak desires. So it's not our fault if we don't get there, if we've got something missing lower down the hierarchy. Do you see what I mean? Now, what I've done with Maslow's hierarchy is I've made it into something that's specific for birth. And you can probably see how easily it can be transferred for birth anyway, because if we need those things in life, then we need those things in birth too, don't we? But to be more specific, what I'm talking about with the heal and birth hierarchy of needs, and I suppose we could just call it the birth hierarchy of needs, and I'll explain as I go along. The very bottom, the physiological needs. What we need at this point is to have all of our needs met on a physiological level, specific to our body doing this big job of giving birth. So we need to breathe. We need to be able to breathe, to be able to focus on breathing. So not being panicked can be included in that. And it might mean being reminded of that as well. So the breath, really important. Our body needs all of the oxygen and oxygenated blood to be transported around our body and to our uterus for us to be able to do this job. We need to be fed and watered. We need energy, and we need hydration. We need those things anyway in life. But if we are doing a big physical feat, as birth is, then we need that especially. And I do find it interesting when I'm talking to people about this, especially after they've had a difficult birth or a traumatic birth, because sometimes they'll say, well, that it makes sense then now that I can see that, because I wasn't allowed to eat in labour, or for some reason just didn't end up eating for 24 hours or something like that. And it makes sense then that they couldn't have got any higher up the pyramid because they were not having those needs met. And it's very hard for the body to do its job during labour and birth without being fed and watered. We might also include in this physiology bit the temperature. Temperature can be important for birth. Temperature of our surroundings and where we are, and maybe if we're in a pool, the temperature of that water, or in a bath. And also comfort as well. Comfort isn't an extra thing on top of the physiological needs. We need a certain level of comfort to be okay. Because the next level of the pyramid is safety, and we can't feel safe if our comfort is out of control. So if we are feeling in a lot of pain and unable to cope and not being supported with the right kind of relief that we need in that moment, then we can't feel safe. So comfort measures become an important part of the basic physiological needs for birth. So moving up then to the safety needs, and I've mentioned having comfort measures as part of that. Our physical safety is important. So our body being in enough comfort for us to be able to manage, because the body matters, and also the mind and our connection between the mind and the body. So if we feel like we are coping, then that's okay. But if it's overwhelming for us, either in our mind or in our body, then we're unlikely to feel safe. So feeling safe mentally, physically, emotionally, that can include knowing that we've got the right support around us to protect us so that we can surrender to what is going on, and relax enough into birth. It can be having all of our other needs in terms of safety met as well. spiritual safety, for example. I have done a post on this before where I've explained each of those things in a little bit more detail as well. So I'll perhaps link to that in the show notes too. So physical, mental, emotional, spiritual safety. The thing about safety is it's going to look different for everyone, isn't it? There are certain things that, yes, we can perhaps agree on in terms of what will be safe for birth. But choosing a location for birth isn't any kind of guarantee of safety or feeling of safety for all people. So one person might feel completely safe at home and another person might feel completely safe in the hospital. And it's important that people make their choice dependent on how they feel about their level of safety. The real safety, as in real actual, how looking at how safe they will be, their body and their baby will be in that place, but also considering how they are going to perceive that safety as well, because perceived safety is just as important as actual bodily safety. And we have to believe that we feel safe. If we are able to have those needs met, those safety needs and those physiological needs, then we could come out of birth feeling safe with just those two levels met. So that's how we achieve a safe birth. And for me, that includes not just everyone being alive, but actually us feeling completely safe the whole time. We might not necessarily feel amazing or empowered or particularly or have particularly positive feelings necessarily, but we feel safe. And when we feel safe, it's really hard to have a trauma response when we're feeling safe, because trauma usually is occurring when we don't feel safe. So if we're protecting those things, they're the bare minimum that we should be expecting to have met and expecting to plan for meeting, because that's how we do everything we can to make this birth not traumatic, which is important. But we deserve a hell of a lot more than just a not traumatic birth. We deserve way more than that. And birth is not supposed to be traumatic. Granted, in some circumstances, it's more likely. But birth, the way that nature intended it, is not supposed to be traumatic in the sense that it is for so many. Big and transformative, absolutely, but not traumatic in the way that it leaves people traumatized, that I speak to anyway. Next level up then, connection, love and belonging. And what we're saying here is having that connection. And we know if the birth workers who are listening know how important this is, because this is going to help us to produce the oxytocin that we need for birth to work and for us to feel nice. So this is how we get a positive birth, by having this level met, by having the connection needs, the love, the oxytocin flowing, and feeling safe, and having our physiological needs met. So all of those things lead to, or are most likely to lead to, a positive experience of birth. But again, I would question whether positive is it. Like, is that it? Is that all that we can expect from birth? You know, I want people to have positive experiences of birth, absolutely. That should be the absolute bottom bar, though. That should go without saying, that we are protecting people and their needs so that they can come away with a positive experience. because, the example I usually give is you can have a positive experience of going to the dentist. I did just the other day, and a positive experience of going to the dentist. You wouldn't expect to have a negative experience, would you? You would be disappointed with a negative experience of going to the dentist. You want to have a positive one. You want to have a positive experience of going to the supermarket. Positive should be the bottom rung of the ladder, and then we can reach for higher. And that's why I really like using Maslow's hierarchy and using the hierarchy of needs in relation to birth, because it gives us the opportunity to aim higher, because we can we're allowed, and we deserve it. And if we end up with a positive birth, then great, but we can also look higher than that. The next level up, the support and esteem, this comes from being well supported, not just having a person there that might meet the connection, love and belonging needs, but actually being well supported and feeling as though the support that we've got really believes in us. That makes a difference. But some of this level, this esteem level, can't come from externally. It only comes from internally, inside us. It comes with us having the self-esteem, the self-respect, the trust, the belief in our bodies and our minds to be able to do this. And that's why it can be really tricky to have that with us on the day we give birth if we haven't paid attention to that before birth. So you could turn up and have a positive birth by accident, technically. You could be lucky and have a positive birth by accident because you just so happen to have all of your physiological needs met. You just so happen to accidentally feel safe and be safe and have all your safety needs met. And you just so happen to have the right sort of love and connection needs from whoever's there, whether that's a partner or midwife or caregiver. And you just so happen to have those things, and that made it a positive experience. But it's much more unlikely for you to turn up and accidentally have an empowered birth, which is what we're looking at when we have this esteem level met. Because often we don't have that, do we? As women and people socialized as women, we don't have the self-belief. We don't have the trust in our bodies. We don't always have great self-esteem. And even if we have external confidence, the confidence doesn't always go really deep down into us. So often when I'm working with people, that's the work that we're doing. That's what we're working on. We're working on building that in antenatally. And of course, the support element is important too, feeling supported and feeling like you've got your cheerleaders in place, you've got your birth team, and they're going to look out for you. When you have all of those 4 things in place, that means that you can have an empowered birth. And the very top of the pyramid, the top of the hierarchy, the self-actualization when it comes to birth, it can be a controversial idea, and I'm not sure why it's controversial, because for me it just makes sense. We have the dream birth, your dream birth. It can be hard for people to talk about because often people believe that if we are aiming for something high and something specific, like my absolute dream birth, and this is how it's going to be, and this is how I want to feel, people get nervous about that sometimes and think if we're aiming for that, then we are more likely to be disappointed if that doesn't happen. But I challenge that idea, and I use the hierarchy of needs to help me challenge that idea, because what I want you to know is that you don't have to choose between a dream birth and a traumatic birth. There is so much more in between. Not having the dream birth go the way you expected to doesn't mean that it will be a bad experience. It's not about choosing one or the other. It's not about all or nothing. You can aim for the dream birth. You can aim for the very top of that pyramid. And if you have ensured that all of your needs are met, you are much more likely to get that dream birth. There's an element of luck. There is an element of luck and just everything working out. But most of it comes down to actual planning for that to happen. If we've put everything in place to provide all of those needs, the physiological, the safety, the love and belonging, and the esteem needs, if all of those things are in place, we're more likely to achieve the birth that we want at the top of that pyramid. And if we don't, if for some reason it doesn't look exactly like we planned, it doesn't mean that it's bad. It just means we drop down to the second to top level of the pyramid, and we can still have an empowered birth, whatever it is that happens. And that's what I support my clients to plan for, and in most cases achieve. We plan for the dream birth, and most of the time it happens that way. And sometimes it doesn't. But usually it's still an empowered birth experience, because everything was in place for that to happen in the first place. So hopefully that's something that you can do something with. Plan for the birth that you dream of. And don't be afraid of it, because if we don't plan for it, how can we make it happen? We can't. It's not going to happen by accident. And I'm thinking, should I do this? Should I quote my secondary school head teacher from when I was at school? Because he used to say, aim for the moon, because if you miss, you'll still be among the stars. I can't say I entirely understood what he was going on about when I was 12, 13, 14. But it stuck with me because he said it enough times. And yeah, I have to say I agree, because otherwise, where are we going to go? We're not going to go anywhere. We have to aim high. We have to keep pushing for what we believe in and what we feel as though is important to us. Because otherwise, what is our alternative? Just to give up and not try at all. It certainly wouldn't be ethical in other professions for us to tell people not to bother planning, not to bother having an idea of what you want. If I go back to where my previous profession in secondary school teaching, as an example, there's no way it would be okay for me as a teacher, or for any teacher, to tell a student that they shouldn't bother applying for university, or they shouldn't bother aiming to go into a particular career. If that's what they want, then we look at what do we do to get there then? And we know and acknowledge that not all plans work out. Not all plans will mean that you end up doing that thing that you set out to. But also, we can be pretty confident that you'll end up on a trajectory that you've chosen still. it will still be a better direction than you doing nothing. And it would be a better direction than you giving up on your life and on your dreams. So, I question how ethical it is for healthcare professionals in particular to tell people to not bother planning for the birth that they deserve, or not. There's no point in having a birth plan, and it all, it'll all depend on the day anyway. In some respects it does. We know that. But there's a lot we can do. And planning for meeting your own needs and having your needs met is a really important thing that you can do in planning for a birth that not only isn't traumatic and not only is positive, but is actually empowering and potentially healing for you in ways that you didn't even expect. So, thank you so much. I'm going to stop talking now. And if you have any feedback or any questions, then please get in touch. Thank you.